Guy Fawkes, whose name would one day ignite bonfires across the British Isles and beyond, was born in the bustling medieval city of York in April 1570, though the precise day eludes the annals with some debate. His baptism recorded on the 16th at the ancient church of St. Michael le Belfry, a stone edifice whose bells had tolled for centuries over the cobbled streets where wool merchants haggled and the Ouse River murmured secrets of Viking longships long buried in its silty bed, the same river that had witnessed the city's Roman foundations as Eboracum, where emperors like Constantine had once proclaimed their divine right amid the legionary bath's steam. The son of Edward Fawkes, a respected Protestant notary public whose quill had drafted wills and deeds for York's gentry, inking parchments by candlelight in the family's modest home on Stonegate, a narrow lane of timber-framed houses with overhanging jetties that cast perpetual shadow on the passers-by, and Edith Fawkes, a woman of quiet resolve whose family ties wove through the city's Catholic undercurrents, her kin including recusant gentry who whispered the rosary in hidden attics to evade the Elizabethan commissioner's prying eyes. Young Guy entered a world still raw from the Tudor Reformation's upheavals, where Queen Elizabeth I's Protestant edicts branded recusant papists as traitors, their masses whispered in haylofts under penalty of fines that beggared families and imprisonment that broke spirits, the air thick with the scent of incense from illicit chapels mingling with the tannery's acrid fumes along the shambles. Edward's death in 1579, when Guy was but 9, cast a pall over the household in Stonegate, a narrow lane of timber-framed homes where the boy's early years unfolded amid the scent of baking bread from the nearby shambles and the distant clamor of the minster's choirs, his education commencing at the venerable St. Peter's School, a Tudor-era institution whose stone walls had schooled the likes of Alcuin of York in centuries past, where Latin primers and Cicero's orations drilled the rudiments of rhetoric into the boy's keen mind alongside arithmetic and the classics that would later arm his arguments in shadowed taverns, the classroom's oaken desk scarred by generations of knives carving initials into the grain, under the watchful eye of masters who enforced the Book of Common Prayer's recitations with birch rods that left welts on knuckles for any falter in the catechism. Fawkes's youth was unremarkable in its outward piety, conforming to the Church of England's rites, attending services at St. Michael le Belfry with his father, where the organ's wheeze accompanied psalms in the vernacular, the stained glass filtering sunlight into kaleidoscopic pools on the flagstones. But the seeds of dissent stirred early, for after Edward's passing, Edith remarried Dionysius Bainbridge, a stern Catholic whose recusancy drew the family's gaze toward the forbidden rituals of the old faith. Bainbridge's clandestine masses in hidden chapels kindling in the adolescent Fawkes a fervent conversion around 1590, his soul igniting with the zeal of one who had glimpsed the forbidden flame, forsaking the Elizabethan settlement for the Roman rite that promised salvation through the sacraments denied in the King's Kirk, his first confession in a York garret where the priest's stole smelled of damp earth and beeswax, the absolution a balm that steeled his resolve against the heretic's yoke. By his early 20s, the pull of adventure and conviction drew Fawkes from York's cloistered lanes to the continent's battlefields, selling his modest patrimony, the Clifton estate inherited from his father, a patchwork of 30 acres of arable land and meadows bordering the Ouse, for a pittance in October 1591, the proceeds funding his passage to Flanders where the 80 Years' War raged like a perpetual storm between Catholic Spain and the Protestant Dutch rebels, a conflict that pitted Habsburg steel against Calvinist defiance in the muddy polders and besieged towns of the Low Countries, the air thick with the reek of black powder and the cries of burghers from the walls of cities like Breda and Ostend. Arriving in 1593 at perhaps 23, Fawkes enlisted under the banner of the Spanish tercios, those invincible infantry squares whose pikes formed forests of iron under the black and yellow flags of the Army of Flanders, commanded by the Archduke Albert of Austria and the redoubtable Alessandro Farnese, Duke of Parma, whose sieges had choked Antwerp's throats in 1585 with a 3-mile boom of hulks and chains that starved the city into surrender after 20 months of famine where rats fetched gold florins in the markets. Fawkes's baptism by fire came swiftly, at the 1594 siege of Laon, a fortified hill town north of Paris where French Huguenots held the ramparts under the Prince de Condé. He learned the grim arithmetic of musket volleys and scaling ladders slick with grapeshot, his courage noted in dispatches for holding a breach under cannonade that felled scores, the walls shuddering like beasts in throes as culverins hurled 20-pound balls that splintered merlins and buried defenders in rubble, earning the Moniker, Guido, from his Hispanic comrades, a Latinized twist on Guy that stuck like gunpowder residue, whispered in the tercios campfires where soldiers diced with bones carved from fallen foes. By 1596, he marched in the Anglo-Spanish expedition against Calais, the last English foothold on the continent, where under the Earl of Essex's fleeting command, before the raid's chaotic retreat amid French cannon from Gravelines, he wielded the petard, that iron-bellied bomb whose blast would rend gates asunder, its 50-pound charge of powder and nails exploding in a roar that hurled oak splinters like shrapnel. Fawkes's expertise in black powder forged in the alchemist's crucibles of the Spanish engineers, a skill that would one day doom parliaments, his hands blackened with the sulphurous paste that caked the fuses he trimmed by lantern light in the siege trenches. Parma's death in 1592 had left the tercios leaderless, but Fawkes thrived in the chaos, fighting at the 1597 sack of Amiens where French Catholic leaguers stormed the walls in a frenzy of torch and blade. The town's 3,000 souls spared the full sack only by royal clemency after 3 days of pillage where wine casks burst in the streets and tapestries from the Hôtel de Ville fueled bonfires. Yet Fawkes's letters home, rare survivals in the York archives, penned on vellum stained with Flemish mud, betray no remorse, only the soldier's stoic tally of wounds and winters, his frame hardening from York's lanky youth to a soldier's sinew, scarred by pike thrusts and powder burns that etched his palms like stigmata, the tercios camaraderie, a brotherhood forged in the shared sacrament of the Mass celebrated in canvas tents by Jesuit chaplains whose homilies decried the heretic queen across the channel. The turn of the century found Fawkes at the war's grinding stalemate, the 12 years' truce of 1604 looming like a false dawn over the Flemish fields, his reputation as a demolition savant drawing the eye of English exiles who whispered of reclaiming the Green Isle for the true faith in the taverns of Bergen-op-Zoom, where the Isle River's barges unloaded salt cod and the air hummed with the grind of whetstones on rapiers. For Queen Elizabeth's death on March 24, 1603, had ushered in King James VI of Scotland as James I of England, a monarch whose promises of Catholic toleration, dangled to secure the throne amid the Gowrie conspiracies' shadows, evaporated like morning mist under the gale of Puritan divines and Robert Cecil's spymaster Webb, the Recusancy Acts of 1606 fining papists £20 monthly, their priests hunted like foxes in the English shires with bloodhounds loosed on the scent of vestments hidden in priest holes carved by Nicholas Owen's cunning chisel. In the spring of 1603, Fawkes sailed for Spain, the court of Philip III in Madrid, a labyrinth of Habsburg tapestries and Jesuit intrigue where he petitioned the king and his minister Pedro de Cespedes for arms and men to spark a Catholic rising, cloaked as Guido Fawkes, his manifestos penned in halting Spanish decrying James's heretical kirk and vowing a Stuart restoration under a popish prince, presenting himself in the Escorial's shadowed galleries with a map of England's weak points. Ports like Berwick and the Cinque Ports marked for landing, while the court's confessors probed his soul for purity's sake. Philip's coffers, drained by the Armada's ghosts and the Dutch quagmire where Spinola's tercios bled gold in the siege of Ostend that devoured 60,000 lives over 3 years, yielded naught but vague nods and a pension of 30 escudos monthly, dispersed from the Casa de Contratation in Seville where Fawkes lingered amid the galleon's creak, yet in Ostend's taverns, neutral ground under truce flags where Flemish ale flowed from pewter mugs, he crossed paths with Thomas Winter, a Worcestershire recusant whose kin had sheltered priests in haymows at Huntington Court, Winter's urgent whispers of a homeland plot against the King's Parliament drawing the soldiers' assent in April 1604, Fawkes pledging his powdercraft to the cause as he boarded a cog for Harwich, the white cliffs of Dover a beacon of betrayal's promise, his sea chest heavy with Flemish matchlock schematics and a rosary of jet beads carved with the Virgin's sorrow. Landing in May amid the salt spray of Essex marshes, he slipped into the recusant underworld of London alehouses, the Duck and Drake in the Strand, its low-beamed ceilings thick with pipe smoke and the tang of Malmsey wine, where Robert Catesby, the charismatic firebrand whose father had died in the 1586 Babington Plot scaffold shadow, unveiled the scheme to raise Westminster Palace on November 5, 1605, the state opening where James, his heir Henry, and the Lords temporal and spiritual would convene. 36 barrels of gunpowder, 2 tons of sulphurous death, buried in the undercroft to shatter the realm's Protestant edifice and birth a Catholic phoenix from the rubble. The blasts roar to echo like Jericho's trumpets, scattering bishops and barons in a hail of stone and splinter. The Gunpowder Plot's genesis traced to Catesby's fevered mind in the autumn of 1603, born of dashed hopes, James's Hampton Court Conference yielding no relief for the £280,000 in recusancy fines that beggared the gentry, the King's Jacobean Kirk doubling down on the oath of supremacy that branded Catholics as traitors in perpetuity, and the by-plots farce of 1603, wherein two priests' daggers had faltered at the King's carriage during his progress to Theobald's house, the blades nick a mere scratch on James's ruff that swelled to legend in Puritan pamphlets. Catesby's circle coalesced in May 1604 at the Duck and Drake. Thomas Percy, a kinsman of the Northumberland earls whose 1569 rising had bloodied the borders with 1,500 dead at Hexham, his position as James's gentleman pensioner granting access to Westminster's guarded gates, John Wright, the swordsman whose blade had guarded recusant masses in the Welsh marches, his scimitar a crescent moon in shadowed chapels, Thomas Wintour, the diplomat fresh from Fawkes's Flemish forges, his wool merchant. Guy's a cloak for Jesuit missives, and Robert Keyes, the yeoman whose stables at Lambeth hid powder kegs amid hay bales, his wife's dowry funding the first barrels. By June, they numbered 8, leasing a house adjoining the Parliament cellars from John Wynyard, the keeper of the wardrobe, Percy posing as his kinsman to secure the Undercroft's keys, its vault a chamber of oak beams and lime-washed stone where in December 1604, under lanterns flicker that cast long shadows like cloaked inquisitors, Fawkes, alias John Johnson, the steward's guise to explain his nocturnal vigils, supervised the Gunpowder's clandestine haul from Lambeth's barges under moonless skies, 36 barrels stacked like silent sentinels amid firewood and iron-bound casks, their sulphurous reek masked by coal dust as the plotters tunneled a mere 1.5 meters through the wall in futile toil over winter's frost, the powder's damp decay from Thames humidity forcing a switch to the ready Undercroft by March 1605, Fawkes's hands caked with the gritty paste as he tested fuses with a flint striker, the sparks hiss a whisper of apocalypse. Fawkes's vigilance was iron, nights spent in the vault's chill, his jackboots pacing the flagstones as rats scratched in the gloom and the distant chime of St. Margaret's bells marked the hours, his sword at hip and pistols primed against the watches' rounds that patrolled the Thames with lantern sway, while above, the realm buzzed with autumn's harvest fairs and James's progresses to Theobald's, oblivious to the serpent coiled beneath, Fawkes's rosary beads clicking like a countdown in his pouch. Expansion tempted fate. Catesby recruited Everard Digby for the Midland Uprising, horse relays from Dunchurch in to seize Princess Elizabeth at Coombe Abbey, her 9-year-old innocence a puppet for the Catholic crown, while Francis Tresham, the velvet-gowned lawyer whose sister wed Catesby's brother, joined in October 1604, his qualms birthing the anonymous letter to Lord Monteagle on October 26, a vellum scroll sealed with plain wax warning of a terrible blow and strange sentence awaiting Parliament. The missive's cryptic quill, debated as Tresham's hand or a Jesuit leak from Garnet's confessional, passed from Monteagle's supper table to his kinsman Knivet, a thread that would unravel the entire weave. November 4's vesperal dusk cloaked the plot's nadir, as Fawkes lit his slow match in the Undercroft, its sulphur trail effused to Armageddon, coiled like a serpent ready to strike, the acrid bite of powder thick in his nostrils. Thomas Knivet, Monteagle's kinsman and Westminster constable, led a search party of 20 halberdiers through the palace's shadowed vaults, their lanterns piercing the gloom like inquisitorial torches to find the alias Johnson, tall, mustachioed, cloak heavy with concealed steel, guarding the barrels with a serene defiance, his lamp and touchwood betraying the arsenal's thunder as the halberds clattered on the flagstones, Knivet's voice a bark amid the echo, "What devilry is this?" Fawkes's retort, "To blow you Scots to hell, my lord," a flash of Yorkish grit that earned him irons and a midnight march to the Tower through London's fog-shrouded alleys, the Thames's lap against the wherries a dirge for the undone deed. In the White Tower's dungeons, its arrow-slit windows framing the night's chill, the rack awaited, its iron rollers and windlass a medieval engine of confession under Lieutenant William Porter's merciless crank, Fawkes's joints popping like dry twigs as the ropes hauled his limbs to screams that echoed off the Roman footings, enduring 2 days' agony of dislocation and sinew tear before yielding on November 8. his scrawled confession, ink smudged with sweat, naming Catesby, Percy, and the rest in a hand twisted by torment, the plot's web unraveling as riders galloped to Holbeach House in Staffordshire, a reed-thatched manor on the edge of the Romney Marshes where on November 8 the fugitives, Percy with his falconer's wrist scarred from the hunt, Rookwood nursing a powder burn on his cheek, Grant clutching a rosary like a talisman, and Keyes whose stable scent clung to his boots, barricaded amid the parlour's wainscot, their desperate volley from blunderbuss and caliver igniting a stray powder cask that seared flesh and splintered beams in a flash of hellfire, Catesby's face a mask of blister and resolve as he charged the breach, his sword splintering on a sheriff's pike before a hail of lead felled him beside Rookwood, the survivors yielding in chains to the cordon's roar. Tresham's deathbed whispers in December, poison or plague gnawing his vitals in his Fleet Street lodgings, silenced the last tongue, his final gasp a plea for absolution that the Jesuits granted in haste, the 8 conspirators, Fawkes, Keyes, Winter, Rookwood, Digby, Grant, Bates, and Catesby, tried in Westminster Hall on January 27, 1606. Before a commission of 24 peers and justices arrayed in scarlet robes, their pleas of not guilty drowned in Robert Cecil's thunderous indictment of diabolical treason that echoed off the hammer-beam roof, the evidence, Fawkes's signed maps of the Undercroft with barrel tallies inked in Flemish precision, the barrel's sulphur stains on Wynyard's ledger, the Monteagle letters' vellum creases, a noose of certainty that the jury, 12 London merchants and yeomen, delivered in an hour's murmur, the verdict's ink still wet as the lords pronounced the doom of hanging, drawing, and quartering. Execution's dawn broke on January 31, 1606, a bitter frost veiling the old palace yard where a scaffold of new oak, its planks planed smooth for the droop's kiss, awaited, its noose of hemp and cauldron of lime a tableau of terror for the 20,000 spectators thronging the Thameside, their breath clouds mingling with the executioner's fog as the condemned, drawn backward on hurdles from the tower through Cheapside's jeering throngs, their entrails churning in dread from the night's gruel of bread and ale, faced the gallows shadow under the leaden sky. Henry Garnet, the Jesuit mastermind whose confessional whispers in Coughton Court's priest-hole had absolved the plotters with whispered indulgences, swung first at St. Paul's churchyard, his quartering a butcher's art where the crowd's groans drowned the pike's thrust that disemboweled him steaming onto the straw, his heart held aloft with a jeer of, "Behold the traitor's liver." Then at Westminster, Digby mounted the ladder with pious poise, his speech a plea for Catholic mercy, "I die for the faith, not the deed," cut short by the drop that snapped his neck, his bowels spilled in a reek of offal as the axe hacked limbs for the gate spikes, the quarter's salt rub a sting to raw flesh. Fawkes, last and friliest from the rack's ravage, his frame a ghost of Flemish vigour, joints grinding like rusted gears, struggled up the rungs with the hangman's aid, his final words a murmured, in manus tuas, Domini, to the Virgin's medallion clutched in his palm before leaping or falling with deliberate force, the rope snap breaking his neck in merciful instant over the cauldron's hiss, sparing the draw and quarter's lingering hell of emasculation and evisceration, though the hangman's blade carved his corpse for London's portals, his head on a pike above the gate a grim sentinel till rooks pecked it bare in spring's thaw, the quarters boiled in brine and tarred for Norwich, Lancaster, Gloucester, and Aberdeen as warnings to the realm's edges. Buried in St. Pancras' pauper plot amid the gibbet's shadow, its earth dug shallow for the damned, his bones scattered in 1612's levelling for the New River's aqueduct, Fawkes's end birthed a nation's right, James's November 5 Thanksgiving sermon at Paul's Cross thundering divine deliverance with 2,000 auditors crammed under the spire's gaze, Parliament's 1606 Act mandating annual bells and bonfires from every parish church, the plot's effigies, first papal puppets with devil's horns, then Fawkes's masked grin stuffed with straw, blazing in effulgent pyres across the shires, children chanting, "A penny for the Guy," as rockets mimicked the thwarted blast with Catherine wheels and squibs that popped like musket fire, a tradition that endures in November's chill. From Trafalgar's 45-gun salute in 1805 echoing the plot's thunder to Louis's 17 processions where 60,000 spectators watched the popes burning in effigy, Fawkes's visage AV for Vendetta in Alan Moore's 1982 graphic novel and the 2005 film's dystopian blaze, his grin a global graffiti from Wall Street's Occupy tents to Hong Kong's umbrella barricades, a symbol of resistance's powder keg etched in anonymous masks that hood protesters from London's Mayfair to Cairo's Tahrir. Yet Fawkes's flame flickered not just in firework spark but in the plot's deeper embers, the Catholic cause, quashed in the immediate scaffold's shadow, over 200 recusants fined into penury, 113 priests executed by 1606 in the hangman's noose or the headsman's block at Tyburn Tree, yet sowing seeds of tolerance's slow bloom. James's 1606 oath of allegiance, a pragmatic olive branch that eased the fines to £20 yearly for non-jurors, though the penal law's yoke lingered till the 1829 Catholic Emancipation Act under Wellington's iron hand. Fawkes's plot, a catalyst that hardened resolve yet cracked the door to O'Connell's green banners. In literature's loom, he strides as archetype. William Harrison Ainsworth's 1841 Guy Fawkes novel paints him a swashbuckling martyr with a rapier flash in Westminster's gloom, his powder a populist thunder against Stuart tyranny, while G.K. Chesterton's Ballad of the White Horse nods to the plot's defiant spark in verses that thunder, the men of the White Horse, and in modern verse. Hilaire Belloc's Tarantella dances to Fawkes's ghost with Do You Remember an Inn, Miranda, evoking the duck. And Drake's Low Beams. Cinema conjures him spectral. The 1922 silent The Gunpowder Plot flickers with his lantern's glow and nitrate reels, while James McTeague's 2005 V for Vendetta revives his mask as anarchist's emblem in a rain-slicked London where Parliament's dome blooms in orchestrated fire. Fawkes's grin, a global graffiti from Wall Street's Occupy drums to Chile student riots under Pinochet's shadow. Historians' quills fracture the myth. Antonia Fraser's 1996 sympathetic portrait in The Gunpowder Plot humanizes the soldier as zealot, not villain, his torture scars, dislocated shoulders documented in the Tower's rolls, a testament to Stuart's savagery that extracted confessions like teeth from gums. While James Sharp's 2005 remembrance of the 5th November traces the rite's evolution from anti-papist purge, effigies of the Pope dragged on hurdles till 1795, to pantomime's play with toffee, apples and sparklers, Fawkes's effigy a scapegoat for the realm's fractures from the Civil War's pikes to Brexit's ballots. In York stone, his birthplace a blue plaque on Stonegate's wall, unveiled in 1970 amid the Minster's spires, whispers of the boy who became bonfire's king, St. Michael le Belfry's tower a silent witness to the baptism that birthed a bomber, its nave where Fawkes's font still gleams under electric lights, while the tower's bloody tower, where the rack creaked under his frame in the Salter's stretch, echoes with tourists' murmurs, its replica windlass turning idly as guides recount the screams. Silenced by confession, the lieutenant's log noting Fawkes's obstinate silence, broken only by the pulley's groan. Fawkes's downfall, though scaffold-bound, endures as caution's codex, a soldier's valor twisted to treason's torch, his alias a veil too thin for powder's reek, the plot a spark that lit not revolution but remembrance's endless night, its echoes in every November sky a testament to the fragility of fanatics' fire. The mistakes that led to Guy Fawkes's downfall were a confluence of operational oversights, interpersonal fractures, and a profound underestimation of the realm's watchful web that transformed a meticulously mined conspiracy into a scaffold spectacle, extinguishing the Gunpowder Plot in a flash of its own folly. Chief among them loomed the plotter's failure to neutralize the anonymous letter to Monteagle on October 26, 1605, a cryptic warning of a terrible blow and strange sentence that, penned by Tresham's qualms or a Jesuit leak from Garnet's confessional in Coughton Court's priest hole, slipped through their sieve of secrecy like sand from a clenched fist, prompting Knivet's fateful search on November 4 without a thorough hunt for the scribe or interception of the missive's chain, passed from Monteagle's supper table amid roast capon and momsey to Cecil's spies in the Privy Council's antechambers, unraveling the Undercroft's shadows before the fuse could kiss the powder, the letter's vellum creases a fatal fold that no counterfeit's ink could erase. Compounding this, Fawkes's alias as John Johnson, while shielding his Yorkish roots and Flemish accent with a steward's guise, crumbled under interrogation's rack in the White Tower's bowels, his initial defiance of, "I know nothing," yielding to agony's arithmetic on November 8 after 2 days' stretch that dislocated shoulders and elbows with the windlass's creak, naming Catesby, Percy, and the rest in a confession scrawled on blood-flecked vellum, the torture's scars not just flesh but the plot's fragile veil. for had he held tongue or feigned ignorance of accomplices amid the salter's bite, the web might have frayed slower, buying time for the fugitive's midland scatter. Strategically, the reliance on decayed gunpowder, its damp rot from Thames humidity in the undercroft forcing a frantic replacement in August with barrels hauled from Lambeth's powder mills under cover of coal carts, betrayed logistical lapses that left the arsenal sulphurous reek a beacon in the vault's chill. No amount of firewood camouflage or limewash fully cloaking the acrid tang that Wynyard's nose might have twitched at during routine inspections, while the tunnel's futile dig, mere 1.5 meters through unyielding mortar over winter's frost, picks ringing like muffled bells, wasted moons that might have scouted alternate hides like the Star Chamber's cellars or the river approaches, the plotters' overconfidence in Fawkes's demolitions craft, honed on Amiens gates, blinding them to the powder's perishability in London's perpetual damp, the barrel's iron hoops rusting like omens ignored. Interpersonally, Catesby's expansion to Digby and Tresham, swelling the circle to 13 souls whose whispers bred leaks in the duck and drake's low-beamed huddles, eroded the cell's secrecy like rot in a beam, Tresham's velvet-gowned qualms and brother-in-law ties to Monteagle a fatal thread that looped back to the plot's heart, while Fawkes's absence in Spain from 1603 to 1604, though honing his powder lore in Philip's armories where alchemists blended saltpeter and charcoal in brass retorts, severed him from English nuances like the Privy Council's web of informers or the King's progresses that shifted Parliament's dates, his Iberian zeal mistaking James's Kirk for Philip's Inquisition and underestimating Cecil's Little Cecil, his dwarf spies, in the taverns. At core, Fawkes and his fellows equated zeal's blaze with tactical forge, omens whispers with operational steel, confessional absolutions with ironclad silence, turning Parliament's foundations into their own grave sod, the plot spark a self-extinguishing flare in history's endless night.